Hey guys, Mark with Think Insurance. Today we're going to talk about water backup versus sump pump, overflow, backup, pipe bursts, things like that. So if you're interested in that, hanging through this video, we're going to go through that right now. What is water backup? What is sump pump overflow? What is contents included? So there's a lot of different coverages that you're going to hear, and this is going to help you determine what's best for you. So there's the main coverage. Whenever you buy a home policy, they talk about dwelling A, B, C, D, E, and F, and all that stuff, right? So they've got dwelling, which is A, that's your house, the replacement cost of any damage that happens to your house within the covered perils. So if there's a fire, that's a covered peril. If they excluded fire, that wouldn't be covered. So what a lot of people don't realize is that water backup and overflow is actually excluded from insurance unless you add an endorsement onto that policy to have that covered. What that's typically going to do is that's going to show you different coverages that you have a few more options to choose. There's kind of a good thing, kind of a bad thing. It's negative because you don't know about it. And if your agent isn't smart enough to tell you that, or if they don't take the time to do it, or they're just a little bit shady, or they're trying to shave off that price just a little bit to get you to buy, they may not talk about the water backup. If they're a good agent, they should always tell you about it. Whether you buy it or not, it's a piece that you can decide. It's kind of like those a la cartes. You can come up with the dessert at the end of dinner, and you're like, oh, would you like this? Would you like the coverage for lines that are underground? Would you like coverage for backup on water? Do you want additional backup on water that covers your contents? And then so on and so forth. So you can kind of pick and choose little pieces. On default, whenever we quote somebody, we typically quote them with at least 5,000 water backup. Sometimes 10,000. And to be honest with you, 10 to 5,000 really isn't even enough, because in most cases, if you have a pipe burst or something happens and water comes in the house, if it's not seen immediately, then you're talking 25,000 plus worth of damage. And so 10,000 might help a little bit, but it's not nearly enough to what you need. The reason people don't talk about it is because it's not the cheapest thing in the world. You add about $5,000 worth of water backup, you're adding about $80 to $90 per year. So now that we've got 10, 15, 20, 30, we've increased an $800 or $900 policy to a $1,500 policy. And so you're kind of freaking out. Don't worry too much about that, because in some states, I'd say always check what you think you should get. Check the prices first, make sure you can afford it and it fits in your budget. And then if not, then kind of tweak some stuff off. Honestly, that's all an agent's looking to do. They're going to give you as much coverage as they can that you need, hopefully not more. And then if you don't like the price, they can kind of chop and piece the thing together so that you're not paying that extra cost. But at least you've had the choice of what coverages you want. So that is the dwelling A. Now let's talk about what's called water backup. So water backup is something that's endorsed, and what that endorsement does is it covers sump pump overflow, as they call it. Those of you that aren't in like Michigan or any of the states that have a lot of rain, that have basements, what they do is they have a hole in the basement, and it has a pump that quite literally pumps all of the sewage or all of the water that's running through the underneath your house. They purposely collect the water around your house and around the inside of your house, and then they suck it out and blow it out into the street. They blow it through the grass. They've got pipes that run all the way down the house, and it just dissipates all of that water from a pump. And what can happen is typically that pump is supposed to be maintained. It even says replaced yearly, which is impossible. I don't know anyone, let me know in the comments below if you are that person, but I don't know anyone that replaces their sump pump every year. I mean, I've had them 10 years, never looked at them twice, and never had a problem, right? Now I've had the opposite where mine has failed, and all of a sudden the water just starts pouring in the house because that pump isn't pumping the water, and you've got a giant hole in your basement. You purposely put that hole to channel all of the excess water. Once your water level gets to the level of your house, if it's a really heavy rain, now that water is going to come up through that hole. So that's overflow. That's one version of it. The other version is if you've ever seen a toilet bubble. So so you got a toilet bubbling, and that is going to be an overflow. Anytime the water is trying to exit out of the house, that's water backup. And that's an additional coverage. Let's go over the two scenarios. So we've got the standard dwelling A, pipe burst in the wall. What would you call that? That's going to be coverage A. That's going to be part of your dwelling. That's already typically covered unless excluded. Very rare that it is. So I would just 99 out of 100 I would bet money that it's part of your policy. So you've got that water coverage for a pipe burst. That's because the water isn't going anywhere. It's not trying to leave the house or trying to come in from the house. Pipe burst, goes in the basement, ruins the basement, all of that's covered. Not necessarily your contents, and we'll get into that. Then we've got our sump pump and backup where the water's trying to exit the house. So you flush the toilet, you turn on a sink, you have the sump pump. So kid throws a toy in the toilet, kid throws a toy in the sink, clogs up the sink, the water's trying to leave the house, not covered because that's now coming up from an overflow. And that's part of the reason they exclude that piece is because that is one of the biggest reasons that that's a problem. Now you may have heard of somebody that may have had that coverage. Honestly, it is up to the claims adjuster what happens. So if the claims adjuster didn't think that a kid put a toy in the sink or the toilet or something that got clogged that way, they're just going to assume that water came in the house, maybe a pipe burst, something happened to that situation, and typically that's going to be covered. The other one is kind of a negligence thing, not necessarily. It's hard to always watch your kids and see what they're doing to see if they're throwing things in different toilets and stuff and flushing them around. So that is one thing that is not typically covered. So what about your contents? Not all policies cover contents. Actually, I've got some companies that I've worked with that don't even offer it. You cannot have your contents covered. So if the water drips down, ruins paperwork, ruins paintings, ruins the silverware gets rusted, something happens, it ruins your couch, they don't cover that. They will cover a remediation company to come in and dry out all the water, to clean everything up. Sometimes they'll cover to dry out your stuff, but they actually won't replace it. So if the TV goes bad, if the couch goes ruined, mold starts to appear, which is a different story, then that's not going to be covered. Some companies and most companies now are offering contents included. So sump pump, backup, overflow, plus added contents. And in that case, it's going to cover your contents. The thing to think about is what about the value? Let's say I have bathrooms upstairs, 2, 3, 4 bathrooms, whatever the case is. If I've got a nice theater room, a nice TV, my kitchen's downstairs, although there's not much that's going to get ruined from the water, maybe the cabinets, all of the stuff that I have below, if there's a really high value, and especially if I have a basement below that, so water comes out from the ceiling, I've had this happen to myself, and it drips into the main floor, ruins your hardwood floor, happened to me, and then it stopped. Now it could keep going into the third floor, which in my case was my basement, and I've got my storage down there. So is $5,000 to $10,000 really enough to cover my contents and fixing the walls and the ceilings and all that? Well, no, that's not typically going to be a situation where we're going to be able to cover that because, once again, if I'm adding $100,000 worth of water backup, now I've pretty much added about $600 to $800 onto my policy. Each one's different, so I recommend that you do talk to your agent about that. So to shorten and summarize this video, we need to know about two things. Standard water coverage, are you okay with just risking, okay, if my house has a pipe burst, I'm covered there, versus do I need a little bit of water backup? I recommend checking it. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. This is Mark with Think Insurance. I will see you guys in the next one.